folks. It is the Friday before Christmas. God, we are at the end of 2020, and 2021 is 2 weeks away. And so today on the Innovative Leader, Christy and I are just going to kind of talk about the possibilities of kind of what we see that could happen, could be possibilities for things to do, things that are going to happen in 2021. We're bringing out our crystal ball. It is quite clouded at this moment, and not really. We're just going to talk about some of the things that we think might happen, the way things might look.
I kind of have one.
Oh, you do? She does. She does have one. I love it. And it's not cloudy at all. In fact, there's Christmas stuff in it. If you shake it up, does it have the snow and everything?
Oh yeah, it's super cool. It's like the cute little, see?
Oh yeah, I love it.
It's very cheery.
It is cheery, and we need that. The Northeast yesterday got about 10 feet of snow. I don't know if you saw that.
Crazy.
Just kind of crazy. And here in Metro Atlanta, they're talking about 40% chance of Christmas Eve snow.
Really?
Or snow after the day or two after Christmas Eve, one of the two, or Christmas Day, one of the two. So even chilly in as far south as Florida
right.
at Christmas. So it's very 2020, right? I think that's going to be like the phrase for like the next 5 years. Oh, this is so 2020.
Right.
Right. 2020, everybody will remember that. Oh, that's just 2020. Anyway, so we're just going to kind of talk about we really haven't planned much talked about this very much. We do some communication during the day and talk about things. We really haven't done a lot of that today, but we're just going to kind of talk about what we see what could be possibilities in 2020, 2021, based on kind of what's going on now, what's going to be happening in the first part of the year potentially, and all those kinds of things. So Christy, why don't you just kind of start us off? Tell us what you think could happen as we hit 2021. What possibilities are there?
Well, I think like we were joking about the crystal ball, that it's not. It does feel like that when we talk about right now. I do think there's more articles and podcasts and conversations about 21 predictions and what is going to happen. And the reason why, to me, I believe that's happening is because there's still so much that is really unknown. Yep. And our brains, our minds really crave what is known. We've talked about that before in past podcasts about SCARF and certainty. And when we have certainty, we feel more confident to do our planning and our goal setting and be in that frontal lobe big picture. And when we have uncertainty, we tend to be more in our limbic system. It's a little bit more emotional. People feel more uncertain. They can feel a little bit more anxious or nervous. And so we have this human desire to want to know, to want to have greater certainty. And when we have that sense of uncertainty, we tend to feel a little bit more anxious. I think that's why right here in the United States and other places in the world too, with the US, I think a lot of people are very encouraged by the vaccine coming out and feeling like that's providing a little bit more certainty for them, which then begins to inform or change some behaviors or just some decisions.
Right.
And so I think really there's this quest for certainty when really there's still lots of uncertainty. And to me, I think really when we're looking at our 2021 possibilities, we're looking at our trends. I believe that we are in this changing era. And that as we talk about our 2.0 and 4.0 leadership, we are tipping into the 4.0 era. I believe that 2020 and COVID has really massively accelerated the change into this era that we hit anyway. When we talked last year at the end of 2020, we were talking about these leadership shifts, these business shifts that were happening. But with the shifts that were happening, it kind of seemed like it was going to take a while, that people were still resistant. It was a lot of early thought, and we were still kind of tied to the way we do things. And what COVID did was really, it was this massive accelerator into the way we work, the way we think, the way that we operate. And largely, I still believe that people in general see that as a blip on the radar. 2020 was this anomaly year that, wow, COVID made us have to do things really differently, and good riddance. We are just waiting for 2021 to get back to normal.
Right.
That, I believe, is a mistake and a setup for disappointment. A couple of things. Number one, I believe the cheese has moved. So we've moved more into this next era, like it or not. COVID and 2021 have accelerated some of the transitions that were coming anyway. And so people have gotten used to more shopping online. They've gotten used to working at home. They've gotten used to some of these more dynamic nature of things. It's changing and shaping economy, business, things like that. So I think, one, there's some changes that have happened that we're comfortable in our old seats. We're comfortable in our old shoes. And so we're kind of hoping that it's going to go back that way. So what I would say when I think about possibilities is, one possibility is, what if 2021 is more of 2020? What does that mean? What does that look like? And not in a way that it's this 2020 of the roller coaster of COVID and kind of fear and anxiety and lockdown. But if we look at what are some of the trends that happened in 2020 around virtual nature of things, virtual learning, virtual connection, remote schooling, remote education, remote like training and conferences and things like that. How could that continue in 2020? And what does that mean for business? What does that look like? So I think, one, there's that piece of trying, instead of waiting for it to go back, what if it keeps moving? And what does that mean for us? What does that look like? And then just adjusting kind of those expectations, because if we think that normal is better, we've made progress wrong. And so kind of just adjusting those expectations of, my expectation is that we're going back to normal, versus what if my expectation and preparation is moving forward into our next evolution.
Yeah, so I think that, I think in a lot of ways you're right. I think companies, I know the company I work for has essentially said that there will be no in-office activity until mid-June. So, I mean, we're as far as people coming into the office, that's not going to happen until then. And there's a good chance that travel restrictions will be there as well. So unless it's like a dire emergency, we don't get to travel, we don't go see clients, those kinds of things. So everything's going to have to happen remote. And I think that what companies are going to see out of that is we can reduce costs that way. And to the point that the company I work for is not going to renew the leases on office space in Seattle and Boston, maybe in 2 locations, simply because they have found that there was no drop off of efficiency or communication as a result of everybody working remote. So I think we're going to see in a lot of companies when remote is a possibility, that's going to be expanded. So I think you're going to see a lot of more at-home remote kinds of work. I think you're going to see conferences expand to a lot more online things as well. I think education is going to be tricky. Because I think at higher ed levels, I think you're going to see more and more virtual. I think at the elementary level and maybe even the middle school level or the junior high level, I think you're going to see the need for in-person on campus learning. And I say that because one, that's the industry I work in, and number two, I have a wife who is an elementary school media specialist, and the stress that elementary school teachers have is much different than the stress that middle and high school teachers have.
Mm-hmm.
And the importance of learning to read those first 3 years of education, there's more hands-on things that are needed to in those kinds of things. I think you can potentially say that education at the secondary level will remote will be a much greater possibility. But I think at the elementary level, they're going to be so far behind that they're going to have to be playing catch up quite a bit. I know Colorado released some stats that said, I think it was third graders that typically, third graders are at one point in their learning. This year, they're only finding about 10 or 15% of those third graders have reached that level. That's really going to be tough because teachers are going to have to try to catch them up. Education, the standards may have to be adjusted. There's all kinds of things that are going to have to that will have to happen in education. So I see that possibility. I think the virtual aspect is going to be quite interesting, but at the same time, I also think that because people have been cooped up for so long, that there's going to be an explosion of movement.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing April. I'm guessing that by the time the vaccine hits you and me, which will probably be March, April, something like that, I think you're going to see people on the move. They're going to be. I think you're going to see people traveling a lot more, being with. We might actually see the reverse. Robert Putnam wrote a book in the 60s, 70s, early 80s called Bowling Alone.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea of the book was more and more people were bowling, but there were less and less people in bowling leagues. And the idea was people have started to bowl more in solitude than being in community. And even I think in his book, he essentially surmised that at that point, people only had maybe 10 good friends that they hung out with. Back in 2007, maybe I kind of did some more research on that, and he kind of updated that and came to the conclusion that most people had one or two friends that they would confide in, deep kind of personal friendships.
Mm-hmm.
And so the bowling alone concept had grown. I think this may be the first year that we may actually reverse that cycle a little bit, because people are going to want to be with people. I just think we have been so cooped up. And I think especially about the people in the West, California, Washington, Oregon, they had the wildfires. So not only did they have COVID, but they had they couldn't go outside. And so I think people are going to be starved for touch and relationship and connection. And I think there's opportunity there. So, I mean, those are some things that I agree with you on the virtual piece. I think you're going to see more and more schools, higher ed, doing much more remote virtual learning. And I think businesses are going to be much more virtual, those kinds of things. But I think the human touch, the human interaction, the need to be out and get away from where they have been for 9 months, for most people, I think is going to be a huge draw.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that? I mean, you think I'm off base on any of that?
No, I'm wondering how does that apply to leaders? So then when leaders are preparing for that, does that mean that what does that look like? If we're selling, should we be in touch with our customers? Like it feels like something has changed with the way we do community, with the way we do relationships. So on one hand, people are desiring more of that connection. But on the other
Right.
hand, to your point about the bowling, people have actually become more independent um,
Right.
in the way that they're doing things. So, how does that evolve or change the way that we do connections or relationships? Because I think you're right. And I think there's a change. So it's almost like this both and. So people are really craving
Right.
relationships and they've gotten used to being more independent. So what does that look like? Does that mean that we're more selective about who we hang out with? Does it mean that we are doing more virtual business, but we want more human connection personally? Does that mean that we expect more from the workplace and that where we might have been tipped work life balance,
Right.
we're tipping more work life balance, or no, sorry, this way, work life balance, that we're expecting more, we need more balance on the life side
Yeah.
versus we're coming out of this productivity era where we gave more to work and we expected life to adapt to our work. Because of this, does it change our expectations in the way we see our work, where we're like, listen, I've been working hard, but I am starved for my relationships. And so people put life first and expect work to accommodate their life. Is that a change that's happened even with staying at home? So if I'm working at home, but I have to work around my kids, guess what kind of trumped work? And people say,
Right.
hey, okay, we understand. You've got your kids at home, you're schooling. You know, if you have to work at 10 o'clock, you work at 10 o'clock. Well, that's fine. That's good. I'm not making it right or wrong.
Yeah.
I'm just saying it contributes to a shifting where life is first, work is second. Maybe a little bit, I don't know if it's fair to say, obviously we're states based.
Right.
What I see it a little bit more, maybe how they are a little bit more in Europe, where the European model it seems like it tends to be more a life work balance versus a work life balance. US tends to be more work first. It seems like Europe can be more life first. Is that shifting for the US? And so as leaders, do we need to be prepared for that in our business, and how do we support our team and our employees, and what do we expect? I don't know. To me, there's
Yeah.
just things to wonder about.
Yeah. No, I actually agree with you in that case. When several years ago, as 13 years ago, I was in Barcelona, Spain, for a week, and the whole town pretty much, restaurants stayed open, things like that. But so much of Barcelona shut down at noon and opened back up at 2 o'clock. And siestas were very real. And it was a time to go and rest and go out and spend time with other people and have a hearty lunch and laugh and joke and drink and do those things, come back and work for a few more hours. Dinner didn't happen until 8 or 9 o'clock. Uh, but I, I think I think you're right on the work life balance. I think it's not going to be work life. It's going to be life work.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there has been so much. Uh, I guess here's part of what I'm thinking in how it might. Um, I think the remote aspects of things are going to be very real, but and leaders are going to have to adjust to that with families and with their employees, and making room and making time and allowances for, um, essentially, if it's possible, just get your work done. You don't you don't have to clock in at 8 and clock
Mhm.
out at 5. Just as long as you get your work done, that's all that really matters, right? And it doesn't matter where you get it done, as long as you get it done, and as long as I can reach you if I need you. But so many. Here's the thing: there have been so many deaths in the U.S. because of COVID. and people can't even get in to see their family as they're dying. And the way that has tugged on the heartstrings of so many in our country, um, and you tie that to an election, and I can see this mindset in 2021 where people are like, screw work, I'm gonna spend time with my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be a big deal. Now, you're going to have those cases where you've got people who are just so financially strapped because of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's, people are going to have to work, and they're going to have to work 2 jobs and DoorDash and Grubhub and pizza delivery and those kinds of things. So I think you're going to see a lot of that. Even the continual increase of those types of positions that are open.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to have 30 and 40 and 50-year-olds working during the day and then grabbing extra jobs at night, either because they have nothing else to do. They want to save money for a trip or a car or whatever, those kinds of things, or just simply because they need the income to pay the bills. I also, so I see a lot of that, but I see life becoming much more valuable and much more important to Americans than work. I think that adjustment is going to be very real in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
I could be completely wrong. We may just go back. Employers may go, forget it. This is what I want. This is the way I want it. But I don't see that. I think leaders have had to transition and have had to adjust so much this year that it's kind of become the new norm. And I know people hate that phrase, but I think it's kind of become that way. That's just my gut, I guess.
Well, and if I could say, I just feel that we've called it the new norm. Society has called it the new norm. I really would like to suggest it is the evolution of progression, and that we think that, oh my gosh, COVID was such a big disruptor. COVID was simply an accelerator of the change that was already happening. So, like if we see COVID as this big enemy that's really messed up our lives, we make COVID this moment in time that's disrupted the norm that we had, versus if we can study and look at COVID as simply an accelerator of the change that was already happening, we can more easily accept the evolution in virtual work and learning, the evolution in personal relationships, and the flip from work to life to work, and the priority. Your point is really great that you were talking about as far as that 2-hour siesta situation. There is a trend right now also that's happening when we talk about wellness and self-care, which again ties into a different piece of the web. As things accelerate and go faster and faster, our minds exhaust and we wear out. And so we've talked about this before too, I believe, in resilience and wellness and things like that. But if you can just allow me the little example, 100 years ago, farmers didn't need to go to the gym, and there weren't gyms because they naturally had a lot of physical labor in their work. So you didn't need a gym. As we moved into 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000, the increase of desk jobs, and even when we had factory workers and stuff, there was a lot of labor involved in those jobs. But as the rise of the computer industry, the rise of desk jobs, well, what happened in the rise of desk jobs? The rise of obesity and the lack of fitness, because we were sitting all day. And so now what happened? Well, the rise in gyms. And so we needed to literally take time to go work out because it wasn't part of our work. I believe the next phase of that is happening as things speed and accelerate. The rise of the mental gym of the self-balance, mindfulness, our personal resilience, that whole piece, that is going to start to increase because we didn't need to do that. We were able to drive in the car and just chill out. We were able to do certain things and just chill out. Because things now are 24/7 as the virtual stuff, we could have a Zoom meeting at any time.
Right.
The data is posted at any time, even at churches. Churches is an interesting trend and example. It used to be Sunday morning. Sunday
Right.
was the day of rest, and you went to church on Sunday morning, and that was this designated time for your spiritual connection, right?
Right.
What are they saying in churches? Churches are moving from don't expect people to show up on Sunday morning. Church is moving to 24/7. Someone
Right.
may be going to church at Monday night at 7 o'clock or Tuesday at 2 o'clock. It's whenever it is good for them. So what does that mean? That's cool in a way, but number one, it makes us have to be more intentional about our mental, emotional, spiritual, mindfulness practices.
Right.
And I'm not merging our faith with whatever. I'm just saying our faith and spirituality is part of a mindfulness where you're sitting, you're praying, it's all in that genre of that
Right.
type of activity, right?
Exactly.
So now, A, we have to be intentional about when we're doing that. B, it moves to 24/7. So that's great, but it's also exhausting. So then there's just this way that it changes the rhythm. So A, you have to create your own rhythms, and B, we need downtime because it's not built in anymore. If Sunday morning, you could keep Sunday morning as your daily practice or as your weekly practice and your weekly standard, you can keep some of those rhythms. But the point is the rhythms are changing. Or maybe you had a 7 o'clock jazzercise class, or you had your 7 o'clock yoga class, or your 7 o'clock workout class. Well, since gyms and that are a little bit variable, there is economists talk about the decrease of gyms and the increase of home gyms.
Exactly.
And the increase of things like that. So we have to be more responsible for sorry, it says my connection's unstable. We have to be more responsible for these mindfulness times, which means that work may implement at 1 o'clock. There are no meetings because we need you to rest and do this self-care mindfulness time. I think we need to consider it. We need to consider what changes when we go 24/7, what changes when people are working at 10 o'clock at night. How do we have to be intentional about taking care of ourselves so that we don't burn out? What are we providing as organizations to help people to do that? Because we know mindfulness is a very squishy thing, right? The kumbaya Zen people are doing it. People who are committed to, productivity, that is difficult for us to slow down. But if we don't slow down, we burn out. So it's an interesting collision of these different things. Like we need to be 24/7, but now we're going to exhaust. So now we need to schedule when we have our mindfulness time because we're 24/7. It's just a matter of reflecting what are the habits and the changes we've experienced in 2020, which again, isn't because of 2020. These are evolutions that were happening anyway. But then how do we need to adjust?
Yeah, no, exactly. One of the, I think I may have mentioned it before, but Chick-fil-A, whose headquarters are here in Metro Atlanta, one of the things that they do for their employees is they get an hour to go to if they're corporate, they get an hour to go to the gym during the day. And it's simply because of some of these issues that you're bringing up, and that's been there. That's not a new thing. That's at least 4 or 5 years old. Because they recognize that that people need to be up and doing, and the stress of sitting all day, hunkered down, looking at stuff and trying to work is just too much. And so I think leaders are going to have to do it. If you own a business, you're going to have to be open to scheduling, allowing people to schedule 30 minutes a day to go for a walk, an hour to go to the gym, those kinds of things. And you say, well, they get lunch break, but some of those lunch breaks are 30 minutes. Some of those lunch breaks are an hour. it's hard to go, I guess you could technically go get 30 minutes in at the gym on the treadmill and then turn around and grab something healthy to eat on the way home, on the way back to work. But you've got to allow for those kinds of things. But I think everything that you just said was right on cue. I think it's going to become an even greater on-demand world. Right. I got an email the other day from Apple. My dad has always wanted an Apple Watch, and our cell provider had a deal where you buy one get one free kind of thing, and so he wanted one, so we bought one, and I got the second one, even though I had one. I got the newer one. And so I got an email the other day. Apple has now opened their own fitness in their fitness app. If you have a watch, they have trainers and exercise routines and all that kind of stuff. It's now, I got 3 months free, and then it's $9.99 a month after that. Everything is on demand. You see more and more exercise videos, things that you like you were talking about, jazzercise and stuff like that. Now it's on demand. There's a whole channel. There's an app. You just go, you do the workout, those kinds of things. My wife does that now. She used to go to the gym for a routine called Power. And then she found the app. It's much cheaper. $5 a month is much cheaper than going to the gym.
Right.
So I think that you're going to see a lot more on demand. I think that's going to be huge. Church services obviously become on demand. Everything there's going to be production quality is going to be a driver, I think. I hate the thought of making a church service a show, but I think production quality will bring repeat visitors, whether it's a church service or something on demand, trainings, those kinds of things. I think you're going to see much more on demand training as opposed to going to a conference. I think conferences are still going to be there. I think they're going to stream those live. You're going to have 2 different price points for that potentially. But from a training standpoint, I think you're going to see a lot more on demand training. So I think those are things that as leaders we need to be prepared for, from a training standpoint. If you're selling, depending on what you're selling, if it's on demand available, you might look into companies who can put apps on Roku, or look at companies who can do apps on Apple, an Apple environment, or even the Google environment, because you can get training, those kinds of things, push it out that way. So I think apps are going to become much more prevalent. I think you're going to see usage go up. Although there is something that came across my my radar last week, and I haven't fleshed it all out yet, but so the Federal Trade Commission is suing to break up Facebook. I don't know if you've seen that.
I didn't see that, but I know there's a lot of conversation about that. I think it's interesting how there's like this, I agree. I don't really support any monopolies per se, but it kind of fascinates me how there's this like on Facebook, but there's a lot of Amazon continues to get traction, which I feel like Amazon is interesting, because Amazon has really, the reason why they exploded is because how they allowed people to sell online. So they became a vessel for the independents, rather than like, oh, everything is Amazon. They're a vessel for the independents, right, which is good. But yet Amazon is really blowing up, like Amazon Health, Amazon, like where they're reaching into is crazy. So people aren't really like on Amazon, but yet Amazon is really a little bit, anytime someone becomes too powerful, you're like, oh, hold on, where's the balance? So to me, people are targeting Facebook because somehow they're too powerful of an influencer, and it's not balanced in the influence. But isn't Amazon kind of in the same bucket? I'm not bashing Amazon. I use both Facebook and Amazon. I'm just wondering.
Yeah. No, but so Amazon, so the Federal Trade Commission is trying to break up Facebook, and they're one of the things I think they're going to go at, or I think it's been mentioned, is to divest Instagram and then to also divest WhatsApp. I think they may actually even go after the advertising arm. If you've seen the movie or the documentary, The Social Dilemma,
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that that not Amazon, that all the social media companies are doing in their advertising is they're playing ads specifically and showing content specifically to keep people on the page or on that social media site.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they do that, they can sell more ads, they can sell more targeted ads, they make more money, they can sell more information. This person spent 30 seconds looking at this ad that was related to this video, and then they can target the information to you. I think that's one of the things that Facebook that's frustrating about, or people find frustrating about Facebook, is they will continue to show you what you have already spent time looking at. So there may be, if you're a right-wing kind of person, you may only see right-wing information and you won't see the other side. And so they're intentionally doing everything they can to keep you on the site. That's the goal. And so I think you might see that. And if that happens, now we're 2 years down the road for any of that to happen, because monopoly cases take forever to execute. But you could see the social media beginning to dwindle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wouldn't be shocked to see that 2 or 3 years down the road.
Or just an opportunity for a new competitor or a new way to connect.
Exactly. And millennials and even Gen Z really don't connect well in person. There's some anxiety there. And so you start to think how that's going to affect the workforce down the road too. So I know that's way past 2021, but that kind of popped into my head because I think you might see some of you're already seeing the shift over to places like Parler from Facebook, and MeChat or Being WeChat. There's so many that have that people are going to because they think Facebook is such a bad entity. And so you might begin to see the diversification, and not as much time spent on social media, which affects their revenue, but it also increases. Now we got to figure out what to do with that time. So that goes back to the whole social thing again, where now we're going to have to, maybe we become more social. Maybe we don't advertise as much. It affects how we advertise and to whom we advertise and how we target it, those kinds of things. So I don't know. That just popped in my head. That was a rabbit hole, and I'm sorry for taking us down that road. So
yeah, no, it's a whole nother, I think it's another, I don't know if it's a possibility, but it's like a possibility and something to consider. I just think it's another thing to think about is security and bias and communication.
yeah.
How do we communicate? We have moved from, again, if we go back 2.0, radio, TV, and then it's moved to social media, Google ads, things like that. So how is communication and marketing changing? How do we connect?
Right.
What are the messages that are sent? So what did 2020 change in how we communicate and connect? And again, instead of waiting to go back, how does it accelerate the movement of what was happening anyway? And so then we look at how do we communicate? I do think it's really interesting. And this year, at least in the US, I do feel like there's been some good alertness to privacy, and also what are the algorithms behind Google, behind Facebook, behind these different things, which honestly, like, we're so outraged at biases, but yet we allow these sites to create more biases.
Right.
Because again, we know neurologically, there, first of all, there's already something in our brain that when you buy a red car, we bought a Pilot and all of a sudden we're like, everybody's driving gray Pilots. What's that? But that we know that's in our mind, that when you recognize something, you are naturally conditioned to notice it more in your environment.
Right.
So that happens without any Facebook programming, right?
Yeah,
That naturally
exactly.
happens. But then,
That term, by the way, is called semiotics.
yeah, and where is it in your brain? It's like the basal ganglia or something like that.
I don't necessarily know where it is, but the term for that is semiotics. If you see you have something now you're going to see it everywhere. You
Right.
have a sign, it becomes much more visible to you in the world. Yeah.
Right. And it's literally in our brain, the way
Yeah.
that our brain works. There's a part of your brain that's what it does. It's part of the function of that piece of your brain. So that is even without Facebook doing that to you. And now with Facebook or whoever doing that to you, and we know it happens, right? Everybody jokes about how you're having a conversation about, with my husband about tires, and all of a sudden I get a tire ad on my phone.
Exactly.
I know I wasn't searching for tires. So how did I get a tire ad on my phone? Right. And that was a conversation. But we see things like that I think further, I don't know, it just brings up this question of what is the balance of our privacy, our security, what biases do we have? You don't even realize that you have biases because, like you said, if you're one sided and then that's what shows up and you're like, wow, look at, here's 20 articles that reinforce that perspective.
Right.
Okay, actually, we would be doing people a favor if we filtered in other perspectives.
Exactly.
If this tends to be what I'm reading, give me the article on the other side so that I have more of a biased perspective.
Right.
But it's just, there are things for us to be aware of. So I think it's in communication. I think it's in bias. I just think it's another thing to pay attention to, not to be afraid of, but to pay attention to. So if that's true, that means that people are looking at things differently. How do we help people to look at things differently? Or maybe they're not looking at things differently. So we need to be aware of that and bring that to the table and to talk about it.
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was going to say, to your point, I saw a Google Pixel phone commercial the other day that was touting the security chip in it for privacy. And so, and Apple has been touting privacy for the past, several years. So to your point, I think that's going to be more and more important. People are going to want everything encrypted. They don't want anybody to get their stuff. I think that's, so you might see rise in security companies. That might be an opportunity. Cryptology, those kinds of things. And so there's potential there for making inroads in a very internet-based, privacy-focused world. So,
right. And then to me, that kind of branches into two different, completely different thoughts, but yet related. In the topic of communication, we were talking about earlier a little bit around the workforce. And I think another thing to pay attention to in the workforce is this evolution of employees and team. So I believe that there is a shift that will continue to happen that actually moves away from giant companies that employ people. And you were talking about people needing to get second and third jobs. I believe what happens is it dovetails, again, the forces work together of companies and people. There already was a trend where people weren't as loyal to companies, where people want to have more freedom and independence. So it breeds entrepreneurship. It breeds independence, where they just want to be a freelancer or a contractor or the Uber driver. Yes, we could go work for the taxi company, or we can be an Uber driver. Uber is a company that employs lots of independent entrepreneurs, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So I believe there's a rise that is going to shift too, as we see more people working from home, as we see more people seeking. I mean, go look on Upwork. There's a lot of people who are like, I just started working on Upwork. Why did they start working on Upwork? Because they're like, well, I can be an editor. I can do this. Let me give this a shot. more people, I think, are putting their toes in there in that pool to be independents, whether it's because they need extra income, whether they like working from home and now they like the freedom, so they don't want to go back to work. Yes, there's plenty of people who miss that social interaction, want to get back to work. There's a lot of people who've gotten the freedom taste,
Right.
and working independently and working at home gives you a whole different level of freedom that you don't get when you have to fight traffic. I was talking with a client yesterday. He's loving his lack of hour-and-a-half commute one way,
Yeah.
and that he just gets to work at home. And so it creates a different interest where A, there's a rise in freelance. So B, it changes as employers. How do we think? Are we trying to make everyone an employee, or how can I use freelancers? It changes the way that we hold people accountable. How
Right.
we manage a freelance team is a little bit more progressive because we use tools like Slack or other virtual communication. So, and then that's back to that whole connection and social media and things like that. What rooms and groups are we using? But I think there's a rise in freelance work that will continue to shift. And then that kind of plays to this other topic, the two things that are related but not related, is upskilling. And what are the skills that are needed? You were talking just a little bit ago about security. So there are jobs, we get all worried about these jobs that are being replaced. And I get it. It is hard. Change is hard. We get afraid. We get uncomfortable.
Yep.
But there are skills and jobs that are booming. UX, that user experience,
Right.
this design thinking. What are we thinking about? So as an employer or as a company or as a business owner, am I trying to just preserve the way things were? Or am I looking at where's the cheese moving to and how are we prepared for that? How are we prepared for a different level of security? How can we be part of that market? How can we be more dynamic? How can we be more virtual? How can we be more nimble? Are we asking those questions? Because I believe 2021 will be more of that. It will be
Yeah.
2020, and that volume of change and virtualness and acceleration only more. So are you waiting to go back to 2019, or are you preparing for 2022 and 23? So to me, that's what I think is possible. But I think we have to think about, what do we need to change in ourselves and our observation, and to your point, the way we communicate.
Yeah, no, I think businesses are going to have to make a tough call. Am I, now that these people have gotten a taste of freedom and are working at home and they like it, you know, you now as a manager or a leader or a boss or the CEO have a decision to make. Are you going to let them continue to do that, or are you going to try to bring them back into the fold, knowing that if they're really good, they could jump ship and do this gig economy. I mean, that's what the gig economy has been about for the past 5 or 10 years. They could jump ship pretty quick and start doing their own thing. And there's a lot of corporate knowledge that goes away when you do that. You have cost of hiring. It's always more costly to hire somebody new than it is to keep the person that you have. And so, and then on the flip side of that, if you use freelancers, then you don't have to pay Social Security taxes. You don't have to pay workman's comp. You don't have to, the overhead of facilities and resources and all those things. It comes, you don't have the insurance you have to pay. There's so many things in that regard. So there's some decisions to be made with that and coming out of a remote working environment. Am I going to continue to allow that and give my staff the freedom to do that, or I'm going to try to bring them in-house, knowing that they could leave fairly quickly. There's a lot of decisions in that realm that will have to be made.
Yeah.
And it's not, everybody's going to make a different decision. There's no right or wrong. It just depends on your level of tolerance for different things.
Right.
So I think there will be less driving, and I think traffic may reduce. which could affect, those support industries that are going to from everywhere from towing companies to even police officers that work those drive time shifts. I got to imagine that Audible was doing pretty well with drive time. Now that there's no drive time, what does that look like?
I think that's a huge one. I've had clients comment on that where they're behind on their learning. So what I see increasing is summaries and this accelerated quick learning, Blinkist or whatever starts to shoot up where I need the 15-minute because that's all I have. I'm going to have to squeeze it in at another time because I don't have that commute.
Exactly. So even from a podcast standpoint, if you could podcast summaries of books, people would probably jump right into that.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fair use stuff would be with that, but I mean, that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
yeah, so many things and whatever, we'll see what comes. But I just think holding that perspective to see the possibilities rather than returning and waiting and, oh, I can't set my goals yet because we're not quite sure when things are going to return back to the way they were and the new normal, whatever. It's like, no, just, study the trends and embrace them.
My doctoral mentor, he used to DVR shows, and he would tell me that he said, I don't really watch the shows, I watch the commercials. Because he said, if you watch the commercials, you'll see where marketing people think we're going or are trying to take you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think might be some good advice over the next couple of months is to watch I hate commercials. I have Hulu. That's how we watch TV for our live TV and those kinds of things. And even if I record something, I can't skip past the commercials. But the advice is well taken that if you see where marketing people figure we are, see where they're trying to take you, or see where they think that this is going, and that can give you some insights into what's going on. From the theater standpoint, people are hesitant to go into theaters now. We went to a drive-in theater Friday night and watched Elf, and it was a fun experience. We hadn't done that in 40 years, but it was a blast. And so there's one down the road that's just opened up. That might be another opportunity from an entrepreneurial standpoint, right. Those, and it would be fairly inexpensive to get going.
Right.
But you also see like Wonder Woman 84 releases in the theater on Christmas Day, but it's also releasing on HBO Max. Right. Disney Plus with Mulan. Hamilton, those kinds of things are there's the streaming. So there's that stay-at-home theater experience. So now you've got electronics that are going to be purchased to try to recreate that environment. Those are things to even consider. So look and see where what's happening now. Watch the commercials. Watch where they're marketing and how they're marketing, and that provides a window into what may be coming down the road.
Yeah, I like that. And I that's why I love Seth Godin. I think Seth Godin is very futuristic and has good thought, but really he's rooted in marketing, but his thoughts expand way beyond that. Right. But also too, I think that loops back to your other point about this whole, people are really struggling to figure out how to do this relationship thing. They don't want to go to the movie theater. So yes, definitely something changing with the way we do our fun, but there's an opportunity there. Right. Because it's different. The way that we used to have fun and get together, that has changed. And so people are figuring it out. And sometimes we feel a little stuck because we want to return to that. But there's an opportunity in how do we have fun? How do we have relationships? what businesses and opportunities open up. So if we take these themes that are evolving and build on them, then we get into that possibility opportunity space. So yeah.
Right.
All right,
Yeah.
we got to wrap up, but
Okay.
really cool things. Go ahead. Sorry, that last thought, go.
No, I was just going to say, you see the rise, from the automotive perspective, you see the reduction in the number of cars being produced every year. Now it's for trucks and SUVs, right? And so one of the things that is happening with that is people, when we went to the drive-in theater, people had piled into trucks and were sitting, there were 6 people in the bed of the truck watching a movie. And so you take advantage of those things that you have to get together and spend time with people. And that kind of goes back to what you were talking about. We've got to find a way to reconnect and to have not redefine fun, but to reengage each other and have fun together. And those are things that can be done. So
yeah, for sure. No, yeah, it's super interesting to think about.
Exactly. Well, yeah, it is that time. And so listen, this is the end of the year. We won't have a podcast next week or the week after, because we're both going to be busy with family and holidays and those kinds of things. And so this will be the last one of the year. We'll be back the first week in January, ready to go. Christy, anything else before we wrap up and kind of shut down the end of the first year?
No, just thanks everyone for listening and tuning in. Have a great new year. Take the opportunity for a little R&R. I think it's a great time for planning at the end of the year and looking forward into next year. Wish you and your family a good holiday break, good Christmas, New Year's, and look forward to connecting next year.
Awesome. Yeah. And if you can come up with anything, if you see trends, things like that, we'd love to hear about that as well. And just to know what you're seeing in the world, especially if you're not in the States. So anyway, well, listen, I extend the same thing Christy shared. I hope you have a wonderful time off, spend time with family and friends, try to reconnect. I know it may be hard, especially with the rise in COVID cases again. But try to get some rest, decompress, and have some fun and enjoy this time of the year. And we'll look forward to being back with you the first of the year.
Sounds good.
Thanks so much.
Take care.
All right. Bye.